The stars had always seemed peaceful to Admiral Jake. He had spent 30 years sailing between them, and in all that time he had believed that humanity's place among the galactic community was secure. The Terran Accords had promised protection. The treaty had been signed by 12 species, including the powerful Dominion. Earth was safe. Her colonies were safe. That was what the treaty meant. But treaties, as Jake was about to learn, were only as strong as the honor of those who signed them. He stood on the bridge of the United Earth vessel Steadfast Dawn, watching the stars drift past the observation windows. The ship was quiet at this hour. Most of the crew slept in their quarters, trusting the night watch to keep them safe. Jake should have been sleeping too, but something had kept him awake. A feeling he could not name, a weight in his chest that would not go away. The communication officer turned in her seat. Her face was pale. "Admiral, we're receiving an emergency transmission from the frontier. Priority 1. Jake walked to her station and looked at the screen. The message was broken, filled with static and gaps, but the words that came through were clear enough. "Attack, ships, colony burning, please help." The message ended. The bridge fell silent. "Get me a connection to Earth Command," Jake said. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. "Now." Within the hour, the full picture became clear. The Dominion had launched a coordinated assault on 7 human colony worlds along the frontier. Their warships had appeared without warning, dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly above civilian cities. They had not issued demands. They had not attempted to negotiate. They had simply opened fire. Thousands were dead. Thousands more were missing. The colonies were burning, and they showed no signs of stopping. On Earth, Ambassador Fuller worked through the night, trying to reach the Galactic Assembly. She was a woman of 60 years, with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many broken promises in her long career. She had dedicated her life to diplomacy, to building bridges between species. She had truly believed, that words could solve any conflict. Now she sat alone in her office, staring at a screen that showed only silence. The Assembly had refused her emergency request. They would not intervene. They were too powerful, too important to galactic trade. Earth's concerns would be noted and filed. No action would be taken. Closed her eyes. She had spent 20 years building relationships with alien diplomats. She had shared meals with them. She had celebrated their holidays. She had trusted them. And now, when humanity needed them most, they had turned away. Far from Earth, Commander Sam Briggs led the first response fleet toward the colony of New Carthage. His ships pushed their engines beyond safe limits, racing against time. Every minute mattered. Every second could mean another life saved or lost. But when they arrived, there was nothing left to save. Sam stood in the ruins of what had once been a city of 40,000 people. The buildings were gone, reduced to ash and melted metal. The streets were empty. The only sound was the wind moving through the destruction, carrying the smell of smoke and death. His crew spread out, searching for survivors. They found none. They had been thorough. In the center of the ruined city, Sam found something the attackers had left behind. It was a small data chip, placed carefully on a piece of broken stone. A message, left intentionally for whoever came to find the dead. He picked it up and connected it to his portable display. A face appeared on the screen. It was High Commander Al, leader of the Dominion military forces. His scaled features showed no emotion. His dark eyes were cold. "To the humans who received this message," Al said, "understand that your protected status under the Terran Accords was always a temporary courtesy. We allowed you to believe you were safe because it served our purposes. You are a young species, barely capable of traveling between stars. You have no true power, no true strength. You exist because we have permitted you to exist. Remember this as you bury your dead. Remember that you live only by our mercy." The message ended. Sam stood alone in the ruins, the data chip in his hand. Around him, his crew had stopped their search. They had heard the message too. He saw the shock on their faces, the grief, and beneath it all something else, something that burned like fire in their eyes. Anger. Back on Earth, President Cole stood before the United Nations. The assembly hall was full, every seat taken. Representatives from every nation on Earth watched in silence as their leader prepared to speak. The screens behind him showed images from the frontier, burning cities, empty streets, the faces of the dead. Was a quiet man by nature. He did not enjoy speeches or grand gestures. He preferred to work behind the scenes, solving problems through patience and compromise. But some moments demanded more than quiet diplomacy. Some moments demanded that a leader speak the truth, no matter how painful. 8 years ago, he began, we signed the Terran Accords. We believed that treaty would protect us. We believed that by joining the galactic community, we would find safety and friendship among the stars. We kept our word. We honored every agreement. We opened our hands in peace. He paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. The Dominion has answered our peace with fire. They have killed our people. They have burned our cities. And when we asked the Galactic Assembly for justice, we were told that our concerns would be noted and filed. Silence filled the hall. The treaty meant nothing to them, said. We were fools to believe otherwise. We trusted in the honor of species who see us as nothing more than a convenience. That trust has cost us 40,000 lives. He stepped closer to the podium, his eyes hard. I stand before you today not to ask for your grief. You have already given that. I stand here to ask a simple question. What do we do now? Do we bow our heads and accept that humanity is weak? Do we let them burn more of our worlds while the galaxy looks away? He shook his head slowly. No, we will not accept this. We will not forget. They believe they can hurt us without consequence. The galaxy believes we are too young, too weak to matter. They are wrong. Cole looked directly into the cameras, speaking now to every human being watching across the stars. We offered peace, and they chose war. Now they will learn what humanity does when our people are threatened. They will learn that our patience has limits, and they will learn that those who break faith with Earth will face consequences they cannot imagine. The assembly hall erupted in applause, but did not smile. There was too much work ahead, too many battles to fight, too many dead to avenge. The war had begun. 6 months had passed since the burning of New Carthage. 6 months of grief and fury, 6 months of preparation. Earth had changed. The factories that once built consumer goods now produced warships and weapons. The research centers that once studied peaceful science now worked on projects that had no names, only code numbers. Every nation on Earth had set aside its old arguments and petty conflicts. They had one enemy now, one purpose. In Geneva, deep beneath the old city, Doctor worked in a laboratory that did not officially exist. She was a small woman with tired eyes and messy brown hair that she never remembered to brush. Before the war, she had spent her days teaching physics to university students and dreaming about the mysteries of the universe. Now, she spent her days building something that could end worlds. The project was called Prometheus Fire. Only a handful of people knew it existed. Led a team of 12 scientists, all brilliant, all sworn to secrecy. They worked 18 hours a day, sleeping on cots in the corner of the lab, eating meals they barely tasted. The calculations are finished, her assistant said one morning. He was a young man named Peter, fresh from graduate school. His hands were shaking as he handed her the data tablet. It works, doctor. At least it works on paper. Looked at the numbers. She checked them once, twice, 3 times. The math was correct. They had done it. They had created something the galaxy had never seen before. A weapon that could convert matter directly into energy. Not an explosion, not a fire. Complete and total conversion, leaving nothing behind. She should have felt proud. Instead, she felt sick. Tell no one, she said quietly. Not until we're ready. Far from Earth, in the dark spaces between stars, Captain Nick Tanner commanded a fleet that barely deserved the name. His ships were old, battered, held together with spare parts and desperate hope. His crew was a mix of survivors from destroyed colonies and volunteers who had given up everything to fight. They called themselves the Ghost Wing because they struck without warning and vanished before the enemy could respond. For 6 months, they had been raiding supply lines, destroying convoys and gathering intelligence. They were a thorn in the side of the Dominion. A small thorn, perhaps, but one that would not stop digging. Nick sat in his command chair, studying a star map on the main screen. His first officer, Lieutenant Bate, stood beside him. She was young, only 28, but she had the sharpest tactical mind Nick had ever encountered. Before the war, she had been a logistics officer on a cargo ship. Now she planned ambushes that left commanders screaming in frustration. "The convoy will pass through this sector in 6 hours, Bate said, pointing at the map. 12 transport ships, 4 escort cruisers, standard formation. Nick nodded slowly. What are they carrying? Medical supplies, food, replacement parts for their forward fleet. Bate paused. If we hit them here, we can cripple their operations in this entire sector for weeks. And the escorts? Dangerous, but we've faced worse. That was true. They had faced worse and they had survived. Not always without cost. Nick thought of the crew members they had lost in the past 6 months. Good people, brave people, people who had believed in what they were doing. "Get the ships ready," he said. "We hit them at midnight." In his quarters, Chief Engineer Tony Vance worked on a broken power coupling. He was a large man with thick arms and hands that could fix almost anything. His uniform was covered in grease stains, and he had not shaved in a week. But his ships ran. Despite everything, despite the damage and the shortages and the constant fighting, his ships ran. "You know," he muttered to the coupling, "you're really not supposed to break every 3 days. We had a deal. I fix you, you stay fixed. That was the deal." The coupling did not respond. Tony sighed and kept working. On the High Commander Al received reports from the frontier with growing irritation. The human raids were becoming more frequent, more effective. Supply lines were disrupted. Morale among his troops was falling. "They are insects," he told his advisors. "Annoying but ultimately harmless. We will crush them when we are ready." His senior advisor, an old named, spoke carefully. "High Commander, the humans have shown unexpected resilience. Their tactics are unpredictable. Their adaptability is unlike anything in our records." "They are a young species," Al said dismissively. "They have barely learned to walk among the stars. What can they possibly do against the Dominion?" "That is precisely what concerns me," said. "We do not know what they can do. That uncertainty should worry us." Al waved his hand, ending the discussion. He had no patience for fear. The humans would be dealt with soon enough. While the Dominion underestimated them, humanity worked in secret. Admiral Jake traveled to the edge of explored space, to a small station where no official meetings ever took place. He was there to meet with representatives of a species that had suffered under expansion 2 centuries ago. There were small creatures, with 4 arms and soft gray skin. They moved quietly and spoke even more quietly. They had learned, through long and painful experience, that survival sometimes meant staying invisible. "We cannot fight," their representative said. Her name was, and she was old beyond counting by human standards. "Our people are few. Our ships are weak. If the Dominion learned we had helped you, they would destroy what remains of us." Jake nodded. He understood. "I'm not asking you to fight. I'm asking you to share what you know. Fleet movements, defensive positions, the location of their command world. Information, nothing more." Was quiet for a long time. Her large dark eyes studied Jake's face, searching for something. Perhaps sincerity, perhaps desperation, perhaps hope. "You are asking us to trust you," she said finally. "We trusted the Dominion once. They betrayed us. Why should we believe humans are any different?" Jake thought carefully before answering. Because we know what it feels like to be betrayed, because we know what it costs to stand alone, and because if the Dominion wins this war, they won't stop with humanity. Sooner or later, they'll come for everyone who ever them, including you. More silence, then slowly reached into her robe and pulled out a small data chip. Everything we know about the Dominion, she said. Fleet locations, command structures, weaknesses. Use it wisely, human, and may your people find the justice that was to mine. Jake took the chip. Thank you. Do not thank me, said. Win. That is all the thanks we need. Back on his ship, Jake studied the data. It was everything they needed. Every weakness, every gap in the Dominion's defenses. With this information, humanity could strike at the heart of the enemy. He sent a coded message to Earth, to President Cole, to Admiral, to the secret laboratory in Geneva. The storm was coming, and when it broke, the galaxy would never be the same. At midnight, Nick Tanner's ghost wing struck the convoy. The battle was quick and brutal. 4 escort ships destroyed, 12 transports captured or crippled. The Dominion forces had no time to call for help, no time to understand what was happening. As his ships vanished back into the darkness between stars, Nick allowed himself a small smile. They were still outnumbered, still fighting against impossible odds. But they were fighting, and somewhere, in laboratories and factories and planning rooms across human space, their people were preparing something that would change everything. The enemy had started this war with fire. Humanity would end it with something far worse. The Armada emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. 200 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled by the Dominion, spread out across the darkness like a swarm of angry predators. High Commander Al had decided to end the human resistance once and for all. He would burn Earth itself and scatter humanity to the winds. On Mars, General Laura watched the enemy fleet on her tactical display. She was 53 years old, with short gray hair and a face that showed no fear. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for a moment like this, a moment when everything depended on her decisions. How long until they reach Earth? She asked. At current speed, 18 hours, her tactical officer replied. Laura nodded slowly. 18 hours. That was how much time humanity had to stop the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Send the signal, she said. All defense stations, all ships, this is it. This is where we hold the line. Earth's orbital defense grid came alive. Weapons platforms that had been built in secret over the past months powered up their systems. Warships that had been hiding in the shadow of Jupiter and Saturn began their long burn toward the battle zone. Humanity had known this attack was coming. They had prepared as best they could. It would have to be enough. The battle began above Mars. The fleet advanced in perfect formation, confident in their overwhelming numbers. They had crushed 100 worlds with smaller forces. This would be no different. But they had never fought humans defending their home. The first wave of missiles struck the front line. 3 cruisers exploded in bright flashes of light. The enemy formation wavered, then reformed. They continued their advance, firing back with weapons that turned the darkness into a storm of energy and death. Laura watched the battle from her command center, deep beneath the surface of Mars. Every few seconds, another ship disappeared from her display. Some were enemy vessels. Too many were human. She felt each loss like a knife in her chest, but she could not let it show. Her people needed her to be strong. Concentrate fire on their command ships, she ordered. If we can take out their coordination, their formation will break. The human fleet adjusted its tactics. Small, fast ships darted through the chaos, targeting the larger vessels. They were outnumbered, but they were quick and clever, and they fought with a desperation that the Dominion forces had never encountered. Hours passed. The battle raged on. The space above Mars became a graveyard of broken ships and floating debris. The pushed forward, step by bloody step. The human defense line bent but did not break. In the command center, Laura received a report that made her heart sink. 30% of the home fleet was gone, destroyed or too damaged to fight. They could not hold much longer. "General," her communications officer said, "we're receiving a message from the Ghost Wing. Captain Tanner reports he's in position." Laura allowed herself a small smile. The Ghost Wing had been called back from their raids behind enemy lines. Nick Tanner and his battered fleet of veterans had traveled at maximum speed to reach the battle. They were tired, their ships were damaged, but they were here. "Tell Captain Tanner to hit them from behind," Laura said. "Everything he has now." The Ghost Wing struck the rear guard like a hammer. The enemy fleet, focused entirely on the battle ahead, was caught completely by surprise. Nick Tanner led the attack personally, his ship diving straight at the largest enemy cruiser. His weapons fired until they overheated, then fired again. The formation shattered. With enemies on both sides, the Dominion fleet lost its coordination. Ships crashed into each other. Commanders screamed conflicting orders. The perfect formation that had terrified so many worlds fell apart in minutes. But victory came at a terrible cost. Lieutenant Bate commanded one of the Ghost Wing's oldest ships, a battered destroyer that had been through a dozen battles. When a cruiser turned its main weapons on the fleeing transport ships carrying civilian refugees, Bate made a choice without hesitation. She threw her ship directly into the line of fire. The cruiser's weapons struck her destroyer head-on. Bate's crew screamed as the ship began to come apart around them. Explosions ripped through the corridors. Fire spread through the lower decks. Bate sat calmly in her command chair, her hands steady on the controls. She had known this moment would come eventually. She had made her peace with it long ago. "All hands abandon ship," she said over the intercom. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Get to the escape pods, that's an order." Her crew obeyed, rushing to the pods as the ship died around them. But Bate did not move. Her ship still had weapons. It could still fight. And there were still people who needed protecting. She aimed her dying ship at the cruiser and pushed the engines to maximum power. Her last transmission was heard by every human ship in the battle. "My name is Bate. I served with the Ghost Wing. I fought for my people. And I want every commander to know this. You started this war, but we will finish it. We will not stop. We will not surrender. We will hunt you to the ends of the galaxy if we have to. Remember that when you tell stories of this day." Her ship struck the cruiser at full speed. Both vessels exploded in a blinding flash of light. The surviving human crews watched in silence. Then, across every ship in the fleet, they repeated her name. "Bate, Bate, Bate," a whisper that became a chant that became a roar. The remaining ships turned and ran. They had lost nearly half their fleet. They had failed to reach Earth. And they had learned something that their commanders had never believed possible. Humans did not surrender. Humans did not break. Humans fought until their last breath and sometimes beyond. 3 days later, Ambassador Fuller stood before the Galactic Assembly for the last time. The Great Hall was silent. Every representative watched as the human diplomat walked to the central platform. Her face was calm, her voice steady. 8 months ago, I came to this assembly begging for help. Our colonies were burning. Our people were dying. And you told us that our concerns would be noted and filed." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We defended ourselves, we fought back. And when they sent their greatest fleet to destroy we broke them above Mars. We did this alone, without your help, without your support, without your concern." Looked around the assembly hall, meeting the eyes of diplomats who had once called themselves friends. "The Terran Accords promised us protection. That promise was broken. We offered peace and we were answered with war. We asked for justice and we were answered with silence." She shook her head slowly. "We will not make that mistake again." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small chip containing the original Terran Accords. She held it up for everyone to see. Then, deliberately, she crushed it in her hand and let the pieces fall to the floor. Humanity hereby withdraws from the Galactic Assembly. We will make our own way among the stars. We will defend ourselves by our own strength. And we will remember always who stood with us in our hour of need and who turned away. She turned and walked out of the assembly hall. The doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder. On Earth, in the secret laboratory beneath Geneva, Doctor received a coded message from Admiral. "Is it ready?" the message asked. Looked at the weapon she had created, Prometheus Fire, the device that could unmake matter itself. She had hoped, secretly, that it would never be needed, that the war would end before such terrible power had to be used. But Bait was dead, thousands of others were dead, and the Dominion still ruled their empire, still believed they could defeat humanity through sheer numbers. She typed her response with steady hands. "It's ready." The final phase of the war was about to begin. Admiral Jake stood on the bridge of the Steadfast Dawn and looked out at the fleet assembling around him. 400 warships, the largest military force humanity had ever gathered. Every ship was crewed by men and women who had lost something in this war. Families, friends, homes. They had come from every nation on Earth, from every colony that still survived, united by a single purpose. They were going to end this. Jake turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to all ships." The channel crackled to life. Across 400 bridges, crews stopped their work and listened. "This is Admiral," Jake began. "By now you all know where we're going. The core systems, the heart of the Dominion. We're not going to raid supply lines or hit outposts. We're going straight for there." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "I won't lie to you. This will be the hardest fight any of us have ever faced. The Dominion still has more ships than we do. They'll be defending their home just like we defended ours. Some of us won't be coming back." Jake thought of Bait, of the 40,000 dead on New Carthage, of all the lives lost since they had broken their promise. "But we're not doing this for revenge. We're doing this so that no one ever attacks our people again. We're doing this so that our children can grow up in a galaxy that respects them. We're doing this because they gave us no other choice." He straightened his shoulders. "All ships prepare for jump. We move in 1 hour. Out." The fleet jumped together, vanishing from human space in a flash of light that was visible from Earth's surface. People across the planet looked up at the sky and prayed for their warriors. Whatever happened next would decide humanity's future among the stars. The journey took 3 days. 3 days of tension, of final preparations, of quiet conversations between friends who might never see each other again. Captain Nick Tanner spent most of that time on the bridge of his flagship, the same battered ship he had commanded through a dozen raids. The Ghost Wing flew beside him, their damaged hulls repaired as well as possible, their crews ready for one last fight. Tony Vance had worked without sleep to keep the ships running. When Nick found him in the engine room on the 3rd day, the big engineer was leaning against a wall, his eyes half closed. "You should rest," Nick said. "I'll rest when it's over," Tony replied. "The engines are good, they'll hold. I made them a promise." Nick smiled. "You talk to the engines a lot, don't you?" "They listen better than most people." The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the core systems. Jake studied the tactical display as reports flooded in from his scouts. The enemy was waiting for them. Defensive stations ringed every planet. Warships patrolled every approach. But the human fleet had something they did not expect, the intelligence provided by the... They knew exactly where the defenses were weak. They knew which commanders were aggressive and which were cautious. They knew how to strike where it hurt most. "First wave, begin your approach," Jake ordered. "Draw their attention, make them think we're coming in force." Half the fleet surged forward, engaging the outer defenses. They responded exactly as expected, pulling ships from other positions to meet the threat. Gaps opened in their defensive lines. Second wave go now, punch through and head for the. Nick Tanner led the second wave. The Ghost Wing, along with 200 other ships, slipped through the weakened defenses and accelerated toward the core planet. Behind them, the first wave continued their distraction, drawing more and more enemy ships away from the real target. On the High Commander Al received reports with growing alarm. The humans were not supposed to be capable of this. They were a young species, barely able to build ships. How had they assembled such a fleet? How had they found the weaknesses in his defenses? All ships return to defend he ordered, now. But it was too late. The human second wave had already broken through. They were coming. Al's advisors urged him to negotiate, to offer peace before more died, but his pride would not allow it. He had started this war confident that humanity would fall within months. He could not admit that he had been wrong. "We will fight them here," he said. "We have more ships. We have better weapons. We will crush them just as we crushed so many others before." The final battle began in the shadow of the. Ships from both sides died by the dozens, their wreckage falling into the planet's atmosphere like burning stars. The space around the planet became a chaos of fire and death. Nick Tanner flew at the front of the Ghost Wing, his ship taking hit after hit as he pushed through the enemy lines. He thought of Bait as he fought. He remembered her calm voice, her brilliant tactics, her sacrifice. He would not let her death be meaningless. "All Ghost Wing ships, focus fire on their command vessel," he ordered. "Take it down." The Ghost Wing converged on Al's flagship. Their combined weapons fire tore through its shields, ripped through its armor, set its engines ablaze. The great warship that had led the attack on New Carthage began to fall toward the planet below. But the battle was not yet won. They had too many ships. For every one the humans destroyed, 2 more took its place. Jake watched his fleet bleeding, his people dying, and knew that this could not continue. It was time. "Doctor," he said over a secure channel to the Steadfast Dawn's main laboratory, "activate Prometheus fire." Stood before the weapon she had created. It was beautiful in a terrible way, a cylinder of polished metal surrounded by rings of energy that pulsed with soft blue light. She had hoped she would never have to use it. She had prayed that the battle would end without this. But thousands were dying outside, and if the Dominion was not stopped now, millions more would die in the future. "Forgive me," she whispered to no one in particular. Then she pressed the activation sequence. Prometheus fire powered up. The energy rings spun faster and faster. The blue light grew brighter until it filled the entire laboratory. And then a beam of pure, terrible energy shot from the weapon, through the ship's hull, and out into space. The beam struck the largest moon. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then slowly, the moon began to glow, brighter and brighter, until it was painful to look at. The matter that made up the moon was being converted directly into energy, every atom torn apart and transformed. And then the moon was gone, not exploded, not broken, simply gone as if it had never existed. The energy of its destruction dissipated harmlessly into space, leaving nothing but emptiness where a world had once orbited. Every ship in the battle zone stopped firing. Every sensor turned toward the place where the moon had been, and human alike stared in disbelief at what had just happened. Admiral opened a broadcast channel. His voice reached every ship, every station, every receiver in the system. "This is Admiral Jake of the United Earth Fleet. What you have just witnessed is a demonstration of our new weapon. We can do to your what we just did to your moon. We can erase it from existence, along with every who lives there." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "High Commander Al, you have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. If you refuse, or if any of your ships attempt to attack our fleet, we will fire again. There will be no further warnings." The communication ended. In the ruins of his flagship, which had crash-landed on the planet below, High Commander Al sat alone in his command chamber. His advisors were dead or scattered. His fleet was broken. And above him, the humans waited with a weapon that could destroy everything. He had been so certain of victory, so confident that the Dominion could not be challenged. He had believed that humanity was weak, young, unworthy of respect. He had been wrong about everything. 43 minutes after the demonstration, High Commander Al broadcast his surrender to the fleet above. The Dominion, which had ruled 100 worlds for 1,000 years, had fallen to a species they had dismissed as insignificant. The war was over. Humanity had won. The surrender came quickly after the demonstration of Prometheus fire. High Commander Al was taken into custody along with his surviving officers. The fleet stood down, their weapons going silent for the first time in generations. And across the galaxy, species that had watched the war with fearful eyes now watched its end with something new: wonder. The Dominion that had ruled through terror for 1,000 years was gone. In its place stood humanity, a species that had been dismissed as young and weak, now proven to be anything but. Admiral Jake remained in the system for 3 weeks, overseeing the transition. The Dominion was dissolved. The 3 species that had formed it were granted independence, free to govern themselves for the first time in centuries. Those who had been enslaved or conquered by the Dominion were given the choice to return to their or build new lives wherever they wished. There were war crimes tribunals. Al and dozens of other commanders were held accountable for the attack on New Carthage and the other colonies. The evidence was overwhelming. The guilty were sentenced to spend the rest of their lives in prison, their names recorded in history as examples of what happened to those who killed the innocent. Some of them protested. They called the tribunals unfair, claimed that humanity was simply replacing one empire with another. But Jake made sure that every proceeding was open, every piece of evidence public. He would not let humanity become what they had fought against. "We're not here to rule you," he told the council in one of his final meetings. "We're here to make sure you understand that actions have consequences. What your leaders did to our people was wrong. Now justice has been served. What happens next is up to you." Back on Earth, President Cole found himself facing a challenge he had not expected: success. The galaxy that had ignored humanity's pleas for help was now desperate to be humanity's friend. Delegations arrived daily from species that had sat silent during the war. They brought gifts and offers of trade, promises of eternal friendship and cooperation. Received them all politely. He listened to their speeches and accepted their gifts, but he made humanity's position clear. "We appreciate your interest in partnership," he told the delegation from the Galactic Assembly. "But we will not be signing any treaties that leave our security dependent on the goodwill of others. We trusted your assembly once. That trust was betrayed. We will not make the same mistake again." The assembly representatives tried to argue. They spoke of mutual benefit, of the importance of unity against common threats. Let them finish, then shook his head. "You had the chance to stand with us when we needed you. You chose to look away while our people died. Now you want to be our allies because you fear what we might do to you." He leaned forward slightly. "That is not friendship. That is survival. And while we will not seek revenge against species that did us no harm, we will also not pretend that the past did not happen." He stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. "Humanity will trade with the galaxy. We will cooperate where our interests align. But we will never again depend on others for our protection. That is our final answer." In the months that followed, Ambassador Fuller drafted a new document that became known as the Cole Principles. It was shorter than the Terran Accords, simpler, and far more direct. Humanity would seek peace wherever possible. They would offer friendship to any species that approached them with honesty and respect. They would honor every agreement they signed, keeping their word even when it was difficult. But any species that broke faith with Earth, that attacked human worlds or murdered human citizens, would face consequences. Swift consequences. Final consequences. Humanity's patience had limits, and humanity's memory was long. The document was translated into every major galactic language and broadcast across known space. It was not a threat. It was simply a statement of fact. Those who read it understood exactly what it meant. Admiral Jake retired after the war. He had spent too many years watching people die. He needed peace, quiet time to remember those he had lost and those he had saved. He chose to live on New Carthage, the colony that had been destroyed in the first attack. The ruins had been cleared, and a new city was rising from the ashes. Jake bought a small house on the edge of town, near the memorial that had been built to honor the 40,000 who had died. He visited the memorial every day. He read the names carved into its walls. He remembered. Captain Nick Tanner was promoted to admiral and given command of humanity's new frontier fleet. His job was to patrol the borders of human space, protecting the colonies that had grown so much since the war ended. The Ghost Wing remained his personal command, their ships finally repaired properly, their crews finally given the recognition they deserved. Nick never forgot Bate. He kept a picture of her in his ready room, next to the transcript of her final transmission. Every new officer who served under him learned her name and her story. She had become a symbol of what humanity was willing to sacrifice for its people. Doctor returned to her university after the war. She tried to go back to teaching physics, to pretending that she was just a scientist who studied the mysteries of the universe. But she could not forget what she had built. Some nights she woke from dreams of the moon disappearing, of matter becoming energy, of power beyond imagining. Prometheus fire remained hidden, its location known only to a handful of people. It was never used again, but everyone knew it existed. Everyone knew what humanity could do if pushed too far. That knowledge was, perhaps, the weapon's greatest power. Tony Vance stayed with the Ghost Wing. He could not imagine any other life. The ships needed him, and he needed them. He still talked to the engines, still made deals with broken parts, still worked impossible hours to keep everything running. "You're a strange man, Tony," Nick told him once. Tony shrugged. "The ships don't seem to mind." Years passed. The galaxy settled into a new normal. Humanity traded and explored and built, expanding slowly across the stars. They made allies among species that had once feared them. They helped rebuild worlds that the Dominion had devastated. They proved over and over that they were not the conquerors that some had feared. But they never forgot. Every human world had a memorial to the war dead. Every human child learned the story of New Carthage, of the broken treaty, of the struggle for survival. They learned that peace was precious, but that peace without strength was just another word for vulnerability. One day, 10 years after the war's end, a diplomat named came to Earth for the first time. She was the same representative who had given Jake the intelligence about the Dominion. She was very old now, but she had wanted to see humanity's before she died. Jake, gray-haired and slower than he had once been, served as her guide. He showed her the great cities, the peaceful countryside, the schools where children learned about the stars, and finally he brought her to a museum dedicated to the war. They walked through the exhibits together, past displays of weapons and ships, past photographs of battles and memorials to the fallen. Stopped before a wall that showed Bates' final transmission, the words displayed in 100 languages. She read them slowly, her four-fingered hands clasped together. "How did your people endure so much?" she asked finally. "You are so young, so few compared to the powers of the galaxy. How did you survive?" Jake thought about the question for a long time. He thought about the fear and the grief, the desperate battles and the impossible choices. He thought about Bate and all the others who had given their lives. "We didn't have a choice," he said. "Our people were dying, our homes were burning. The galaxy told us we were weak, that we should accept our fate, but we couldn't do that. We couldn't just give up and let our children grow up as slaves. He looked at Bates' words on the wall. We're not special, he continued. We're not smarter or stronger than anyone else. We're just stubborn. When someone hurts our people, we don't forget. We don't forgive until justice is done. And we never ever stop fighting. Nodded slowly. The Dominion thought they understood humans. They thought you were like all the other young species they had crushed. They were wrong. They were wrong, Jake agreed. As they left the museum, asked one final question. A veteran named Greg Palmer, who had served under Nick Tanner during the war, was standing near the exit. He was older now, with a limp from an old wound, but his eyes were still sharp. Why did you rebuild instead of conquer? Asked him. You had the power to rule the galaxy. Many species would have used that power. Why didn't you? Greg thought about it for a moment, then he smiled. We're not here to rule the galaxy, he said. We're just here to make sure no one ever forgets what happens when you hurt our people. Looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, understanding at last why the galaxy now watched humanity with something new in their eyes. Not fear, not envy. Respect. Outside, the sun was setting over the city. Children played in the streets, their laughter carrying through the evening air. Ships rose toward the stars, carrying humans to 100 worlds across the galaxy. And somewhere in the darkness between those stars, Prometheus' fire waited in silence, a promise and a warning to anyone who might forget. Humanity had concluded the debate with final terms. The galaxy had listened.